After his most successful season in Formula 1, Red Bull has signed Max Verstappen until the end of the 2023 season. I'm sure news you will have seen already. Now, joining me, Ben Anderson and Stuart Codling to talk this through. We've seen Verstappen compared to a young Senna by Honda. There's no surprise that he's got on well with Honda. His relationship with Renault really broke down towards the end. And then we've seen the first year of the Red Bull-Honda relationship coming together really nicely. Verstappen, as we've said, his best result so far in his Formula 1 career. Stuart, is this a sign of how well that relationship has gone this year and how well they've bedded together? Because that must have been an important thing for that relationship to work well in its first year.
Yeah, he's basically kind of the compliant superstar that they wanted Fernando Alonso to be, and that relationship fell out of bed very quickly because he's fast, he's a global star, he's got resonance, he's got people queuing up to see him at races, and he delivered them the victories they wanted. He won 3 races, arguably could have won 5 maybe. You know, Monaco might have been different if he got past Hamilton. Hungary, arguably he should have won, but his teammate was popping off a tee down the back and left a big space that enabled Mercedes to manipulate the race. But yeah, so should have won 5 races, and I think Honda certainly maybe exceeded their own expectations, certainly exceeded Red Bull Racing's expectations. So it was needed to justify the amount of money they've spent, because the F1 programme has sucked in resources from all over the company. And
his youthfulness really satisfies the Red Bull criteria of all the gaming that he does and stuff like that as well. Ben, driver market, that's what people are really going to care about, what this means for the driver market. Obviously 2021 is the big year where the new rules come in. Most of the contracts in F1, excluding Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen, the main ones, most of those contracts are ending at the end of 2020, so we're going to see a big driver market search. We've heard Lewis Hamilton to Ferrari, we've heard Sebastian Vettel to Red Bull, and we've heard Max Verstappen to Mercedes. How does this contract move, affect how that plays out?
Well, it takes a lot of sting out of that driver market, poison, if you like. Verstappen and Leclerc obviously have removed themselves from contention. Leclerc committing his long-term future to Ferrari. I mean, he had a contract that took him beyond 21 anyway, but now he's going to the end of 2024. That's a statement of intent from Ferrari. He's their man. Verstappen has already been on record saying there's no point having 2 #1 drivers in a team. Mercedes have learned that lesson the hard way, so Verstappen committing to Red Bull, that takes another top seat off the table. We expect that Mercedes will do everything they can to keep stability in that team, certainly retain Lewis Hamilton. It probably strengthens Bottas's position in the second seat as well. If they were going to pull the trigger on him, it would have happened, I think, in the middle of last season. It hasn't. So you start to look at the second seats, if you like, at Ferrari and Red Bull. Vettel is the big question mark. His contract is up at the end of 2020. There were some questions over whether he would even continue into this season. He is going to do that. Will he stay on after that? A lot will depend on his relationship with Leclerc and how that season goes. Alex Albon, obviously he's still finding his feet. He has a lot to prove, but whoever goes into that team has got to go up against Max. The rest of the grid, I mean, Ocon is committed beyond 21 at Renault. Perez has committed beyond 21 at Racing Point. Other than that, all the seats are up for grabs. So what will happen most likely is that eventually those slots at Ferrari and Red Bull will fill, provided Mercedes stays stable, and then everyone will just find their feet afterwards. But it won't be as exciting as we were hoping.
So the viewers will be hoping for one of those situations in history that we've seen where contracts are signed long term and then are suddenly magically erased. Stuart, statement of intent from Red Bull, do we think? That's a pretty straightforward and simple question. Is this Red Bull really showing that they want to play ball with the big boys now? They've been floundering for a little bit now, obviously still winning races, but not that dominance that we saw with Sebastian Vettel for so long in the early 2010s. Is this a statement of intent from them to join that group again?
Well, certainly it cleaves to the belief that the Honda board need a little bit more kind of proof that Formula 1 is working for them in terms of return on investment. And so to that extent, you could view this sort of contract extension as kind of one of the levers that Red Bull would like to pull to try and persuade Honda to stay on. But also Red Bull needed to convince Max to stay on, because there's been constant talk about possible moves to Mercedes. When he signed his last 3-year contract extension back in 2017, that was as a result of Mercedes kind of coming hunting for him and maybe starting to waver with their commitment towards Valtteri Bottas. So I think this is kind of coming back to where they were midway through last season. Max starting to waver. There was talk about Mercedes coming calling again. Red Bull were going for the outboard loaded front wing concept, not really making it work. And round about August time, which is where the designers are starting to think about the car architecture for next year, they made that breakthrough with the new front wing that unlocked a lot of performance from the other upgrades they'd added. And all of a sudden the car came good, having been a little bit of a lemon, particularly for Pierre Gasly in the first few races of the year. So maybe that helped to sort of set in Max's mind a little bit of faith that they actually knew what they were doing.
As Stuart quite rightly mentions, Honda are signed up until the end of 2021, whereas Max Verstappen signed up now until the end of 2023. So maybe that's a nice bit of leverage that Red Bull will try and use to persuade Honda to stay in Formula One. So, Ben, back to the driver market, but from Max Verstappen's point of view now. Was it wise of him to take himself out of this driver market silly season so early? Because obviously we're going to have so many moves coming next season ahead of 2021, as we mentioned before.
Yeah, I think so. On the balance of probabilities, his only realistic options in terms of improving his situation are Ferrari and Mercedes, and Ferrari is questionable. They went backwards in 2019 compared to the season before. Leclerc extending his deal at that team very much is, as I said, a statement of intent from Ferrari that he's their man. Verstappen is not going to want to go into that team and try and battle for #1 status. He's already done that at Red Bull when Daniel Ricciardo was there. Mercedes then is the only other option, and as Stuart mentioned, he's routinely been linked with switches to that team. But if you take Mercedes out of the equation, you assume Lewis Hamilton is going to renew and go for those record-beating 8 championships. Red Bull's his best option, and last year was a big turning point for Verstappen in terms of growth within the team, feeling that it was building around him. He came out of his shell a lot more inside that team, but nevertheless there was still speculation about him not seeing his previous contract through to the end. By announcing this deal now, they take the sting out of that story completely. It avoids any speculation linking him with any move away for 2021, and Red Bull, Honda and Max can just focus on the job at hand, which is to bridge that final gap to Mercedes and challenge them for the World Championship.